Financially raw, real, authentic wisdom with Lourens from Retire.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Financially Raw, Real Authentic Wisdom. It's me, Lourens, and it is a Thursday morning. We're running a little bit late. We're about 5 minutes over time. We had a few technical difficulties on our side. For some reason, the software didn't want to stream to our social media platforms, and I didn't want to start the show without our friends on our social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, all of you watching. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I'm looking forward to having a good show with you. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about Power Cow. Or what does Power Cow mean? What does it entail? And how can you use Power Cow to solve your retirement worries? I always talk, this is basically the foundation of everything I've done for the last 25 years of my life. It's all about getting people to solve the retirement crisis. And we are sitting in a retirement crisis. 96% of people retiring in South Africa cannot maintain their standard of living within 5 years after retirement. So it is a crisis, and if we just continue doing what everybody else is doing, we're going to get exactly what everybody else got. So we need to change things, and that's been my mission over the last 20 to 25 years of my life, is to get a different approach and start working towards these things in a different way. So I'm looking forward to sharing everything with you today, and looking forward to having some nice discussions. So if you are listening on Berg Studio, we will have some music as well. And the music topic we're going to play today is some one-hit wonders from the early 2000s. I've done some one-hit wonders from the 80s. I've done some one-hit wonders from the 90s. But I haven't done the 2000s yet. And I was actually quite surprised how many good songs were one-hit wonders in the 2000s. So we're going to play some music from there. As per usual, those of you who are watching on our social media channels, unfortunately, we can't play you the music. So we're going to talk a little bit, or I'm going to show you a video on why we created the coaching program, where we teach and we coach people to implement our steps, and then also how iRetire's coaching program works. So you can have a look at that while we have our music breaks on the other side. So guys, sit back, relax, enjoy the morning with me, and I'm looking forward to sharing some wisdom with you. You are welcome to give me a shout out on Berg Studio. If you are listening on Berg Studio, there's a little shout out button at the top. You can click there and you can communicate with me directly in studio. On Facebook, you can send me some messages as well. And then also on our social media channels as well, Facebook, YouTube, and also LinkedIn. And then you are also welcome to WhatsApp me on my direct line. My number is 082-801-6693. So I'm going to repeat that, 082-801-6693, and you are welcome to send me a WhatsApp there if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer those questions for you. So let's go for our first music break, and we are going to listen to Wherever You Will Go from The Calling. Okay guys, you guys on OBS, we're going to look at that video on why we created the coaching. Okay, so the question I got this morning, and I'm going to translate from Afrikaans to English as I read the question, so bear with me. He says, I've got a question. Is there any benefit or detriment in the use of one of two different sets of ETF funds? Now, for those of you who don't know, an ETF is an exchange traded fund, which is an investment vehicle. He says instead of accept only the TER, the cost ratio, the cost of the two ETFs. So what he's asking is, if the two ETFs is similar, except the cost, they both invest in exactly the same funds, or they're exactly the same index, which means that they would basically have the same return on investment. But the one is directly invested in US dollars and the other one is invested through the JSE. So it's still Rand based, but through the JSE it's then invested in US dollars. Would there be a benefit? Which one would I choose? So it was an interesting question for me. So what I explained to him is I said, so for me it depends, because firstly the two funds will have the same return on investment because it's invested in the same index, it's invested in the same place. But it's going to depend on whether you're going to use that money in South Africa in rands, or if you're planning to immigrate and use it in US dollars. Because if you are planning to immigrate and planning to keep it in US dollars, you'd rather use the US dollar fund. So you'd rather go through the efforts, pay the cost of moving the money out of South Africa into US dollars. If you are planning to stay in South Africa and it's going to be in rands, you're going to withdraw the money from that investment in rands eventually, then it would be pointless to take that money, move it into US dollars, pay the cost, and then once you mature it, move it back into rands and pay the cost again. Then rather just keep it in rand. So that for me was the answer. So that's just an interesting question I got this morning from one of our students, and I thought I would share it with you. So if you have any questions on that, you are welcome to ask, and I will talk about that. So let's talk a little bit about personal financial coaching, and why did we get to this point where I decided to create a coaching system. So I started the business in 2002. I realized that there was a major problem in the financial services industry, basically focused on two areas. The first area was the fact that it's mostly a selling business. There's not a lot of education going on. And I saw it the other day again. I was on Facebook, and then there was this ad running about cheap life cover. And you don't have to go for a lot of medicals. And there was like 635 comments on this ad. And I started reading through the comments. And as I read through it, I realized that people have no clue how these things work, how a risk products work, how life cover works. There was comments like, so the only time anybody's... Welcome back, everyone. And for those of you who are listening to mix to our music on Berg Studio, you were listening to Wherever You Will Go from The Calling, one of our one-hit wonders from the early 2000s. So what is our topic today? We're going to talk about doing pow cow. And what does pow cow mean? It's a term I coined a couple of years ago, talking about protection of wealth and creation of wealth, and how you use those two pillars to create financial abundance and financial sustainability in retirement. So let's start with that, and I'm going to share with you a little bit of our of some of my points that I want to run through with you. The first one is a protection of wealth. That's the power side of the power cow. Now, what's nice about power cow, it's something that you can remember quite easily. I promise you, if I ask you tomorrow morning, what did I say, you're going to remember power cow, because it's something that really works with you. So protection of wealth. So that is anything you can do to preserve what you have at the moment. So it doesn't matter where you are, you have created certain things. You've created the house that you stay in, you've created the furniture that you have, the car that you drive, the money in the bank, the retirement planning you have. That's all things that you created. I always talk about the goose that lays the golden eggs. And you are the goose that lays the golden eggs. So you create it. Look around, see what you've got, see what you have built, and be proud, because that is what you've created. A lot of people say to me, yeah, but I don't have any wealth to protect. Well, if you look at your situation, And even though you might stay in a middle class house, drive a second-hand vehicle, have furniture that is 10 or 15 years old, and you think you don't have a lot of wealth, you go to some places in the world and the people living there will look at you as if you are a billionaire, because they can't even imagine having furniture, having a car to drive, because they walk where they need to be. So it's all about perspective. So your wealth is the things that you already have, and you need to preserve what you have. You need to work on creating wealth, but firstly you need to preserve the wealth that you do have. Now, how do we do that? The first thing we do is we focus on education. Guys, money is a game, and we come from an education system that for generations have taught us how to become good employees and earn an income, but it doesn't teach us what to do with the income once we've earned it. We're not getting the financial education for us to win at the game of money. I'm almost sure if you sit there, you can relate to this, in the sense that it feels like other people that are wealthy and people that are rich, they know things that you don't know. And you are 100% correct. They do know things that you don't know. They've been taught the rules. They've been taught, or they've been given the keys to the right vehicle to get them to financial independence and financial abundance, which you might not have. So it doesn't matter what you want to do, you have to start with education first. I always say to people, we as a company, we're an education company first and an implementation company second, because you can't start implementing until you've done education. That is the most important thing first. You need to understand what's going on. There's too much in this country, and I think in all the countries in the world, where people want other people to make their financial decisions for them, to be responsible for their financial future, to do things for them because they don't want to understand, they don't want to learn. They just say to the broker, the financial advisor, you just do what you think is best. I trust you. The problem with that approach is, guys, you don't know, you're not in control, you are not being proactive, you are being reactive. You need to educate yourself. You need to create a system, create a strategy for you to create financial abundance. An extraordinary life does not get created by accident. It gets created on purpose. So becoming financially independent, becoming financially free, or just having a comfortable retirement one day doesn't just happen by accident. You have to literally sit down and plan it out and know exactly where you are going. Otherwise, you're going to end up exactly where you are planning to go, which is nowhere, because you haven't planned to go to a specific place. If I say to you, listen, let's go on holiday, and you say, well, where are we going? And I say, well, I don't know, let's just go on holiday. How excited are you going to get about that holiday? Not very excited, because you have no idea where we are going. So it is important for you to find out where you're going, and secondly, to start planning where you're going. Because if you don't know where you are going, you can't start planning the route. And it all starts with education. It starts with you getting the financial education, understanding how everything works, understanding how investments work, understanding how debt works, understanding how risk works. All of these things, budgeting works. You need to understand that. And that is why we as a company have created a coaching system to help people take control of their cash flow, build wealth, build passive income. Because just figuring it out on your own, it takes a lot of time and it's very difficult. And you battle with that knowing-doing gap. Knowing something but not knowing how to implement it. So we not only educate you, but we also take you by the hand and help you with the implementation of that. Okay, so the second part of your protection of wealth is to get control, do budgeting, learn how to budget, again an education system, and then work on your cash flow management. If you do not know how to budget and manage your cash flow, you will never create financial independence. Guys, most people, about 97% of people in South Africa, have either no budget or have a very limited budget, just making provision for their main expenses, their big expenses like their car, their house, their debit orders going off. Only about 3% of South Africans have an in-depth budget, managing exactly what they need to spend on planned and unforeseen expenses. So budgeting is 80% looking backwards and 20% looking forward. So even if you do budget every month, you can't budget for the month ahead until you've looked at the month that have just passed and seen where your money is gone, so you can see where you are spending your money. So this budgeting and cash flow management is the foundation of everything. You need to start with that, because you first need to control the income that you already have before you start adding more income. Most people think that their financial struggles is an income problem, but most often it's not an income problem, it's a financial management and expense problem that they're trying to fix with income. And what happens when you try and fix a financial management and expense problem by just adding more income? What happens is you just create more expenses and more financial management issues. So you first have to address that before you add more income. The analogy I use when I explain this to people is, if you lived in a cabin in the woods and you were about 1 kilometer away from the nearest water source, and you had to carry water in a bucket back to your cabin every day, but you realize your bucket is full of holes, are you going to run faster, walk more often to get the water? Or are you going to make sure that you first plug the holes in your bucket? Now, the logical answer is you'll sit down and you'll take some time to plug the holes in your bucket. But when it comes to our budget, when it comes to our cash flow, that's not what we do. We know our bucket is full of holes, but what do? We rather run for the next increase or promotion, or go to another company, start a part-time business, anything to increase the revenue that comes into the bucket, but we never fill the holes. And the more revenue we add, the bigger the holes become, and the worse our financial situation becomes. And then we don't understand, but why did this happen to us? Why does it always feel like we cannot get ahead? And it happens because we have no control, because we're not doing budgeting, and we don't have a proper cash flow management system. So budgeting alone is also not enough. You need to have a cash flow management system as well, on how are you spending your money? How are you giving every rand a job? Because it's important to have control over how the money flows into your account and how the money flows out of your account and how it is being spent. So you need to have that plan as well. Okay, so next one we're going to talk about is getting rid of bad debt. We go for another music break, and we are going to listen. Those of you who are listening on Berg Studio, we're going to listen to some Stacy's Mom from Fountains of Wayne. And when I come back, we are going to talk about debt and how to get rid of that debt. Okay guys, for those of you who are watching on our social media channels, let's continue with our video on why we created the coaching program. What's going to benefit on that is if I die. Well, obviously that's why it's life cover. Or, yeah, so but what happens if I don't die and I get to 65, then what happens to all the money that I've paid? I'm losing all of that money. So it just shows that people aren't educated. They don't understand this. So that was a passion for me. Financial education has been a passion for me since I was very young. The second one was the retirement crisis, and we talk a lot about the retirement crisis, where 96% of people who retire in South Africa cannot maintain their standard of living within 5 years after retirement. And the problem was that nobody was doing anything different. They just kept saying the same thing and expecting a different result. So I started the company in 2002 to create alternative strategies to solve the retirement crisis. So for the first couple of years, The focus of the business was to help people and create these extra income, because I thought that if we can help people to generate passive income through business assets, etc., we would solve the financial crisis or the retirement crisis for them. And then we started helping people earn an extra 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 Rand per month. But then after a couple of years of doing this, I realized, but I looked at these people and I saw that, but we didn't improve their standard of living. We didn't bring them any closer to retirement, because all that happened is that 6,000 or 7,000 Rand a month went into their bank account, their expenses increased, and now suddenly they can't get along without that money. If we go and take that 6,000 Rand away out of their budget, they are financially in trouble. So what I did is I made a huge mistake. Instead of giving people freedom, all I did is I made their prison cell a little bit bigger and a little bit more comfortable, but they were still in prison. They didn't get any freedom. So then I looked at everything and I said, okay, so yes, passive income is the solution for retirement, but just giving people more money is not going to solve their problem. Most often, it is not an income problem. It's a financial management and expense problem. By trying to solve a financial management and expense problem by just throwing more money at it, just addresses the symptoms. It doesn't address the cause. It actually makes the cause worse. It actually makes the problem worse. And you can look at that if you look at Eskom, for example, and we've got a lot of articles and everything running around about Eskom asking for increases of over 50% on electricity. And how many times over the last couple of years have they increased electricity? And has it changed Eskom's situation? Giving them so many billions and billions more money, has it solved Eskom's financial woes? No. And welcome back, everyone. That is our music break done and dusted. Those of you who are listening on Berg Studio, I listened to Stacy's mom, and yeah, I still remember, I think that song was part of the first American Pie, if I remember correctly. Yeesh, those were the days. It's amazing how many of these songs I've completely forgotten about, and when you hear it, you go, oh yes, I remember. So that's good. Yes, so those of you who are listening on our social media, we had our video, and we will continue with that video when we have our next music break on why we created the coaching program. Again, you are welcome to give us a shout out. On Berg Studio, we had Frikkie say, hi Lourens, looking forward to the show. Hi Frikkie, it's good to have you on and listening. Great to share with all of you. If you are on our social media, you are welcome to ask us a question there as well, or you can send me a direct WhatsApp on my WhatsApp number. It's 082-801-6693. So you're welcome to send me a WhatsApp there as well. Okay, guys, so let's continue to point number 3 under the protection of wealth. Anything you can do to preserve what you have. So the third one is getting rid of bad debt. Why is bad debt important when you want to preserve what you have? Because, guys, not only does the bad debt kill your cash flow, it is the most expensive debt. It is basically the modern way or type of slavery, because suddenly you are working a certain amount of hours every month just to pay your debt. And it would be actually, you should sit down and do a calculation. Go and sit down and look at what is your monthly debt repayments that you are paying towards credit cards, overdrafts, personal loans, clothing accounts, all of those accounts. Make a list of all of those expenses. Then have a look at what are you earning per hour. Deduct tax from that, and then see how many hours a month are you working for the bank, working for Edgar's, working for the furniture company. How many hours are you actually working for them, and how many hours a month are you working for yourself? Because those hours that you work for the bank, that you work for the clothing company, that is slavery. That is hours that you work for them for free. They make money from the work that you do. So you want to get rid of bad debt. So what is bad debt? Bad debt is what we call unsecured debt. That is the debt that you have that is not secured by any asset. Things like a credit card, there's no asset underlying that debt, and that's why the risk for the bank is higher, and therefore the bank's interest rate is the highest on that. That is also what kills your cash flow. That is what is most expensive. Just give me 1 second. I just want to get this dog sorted out. Yeah, as per usual, my little puppy is with me in the studio, and he has this thing of wanting to come in when the door is closed, and the moment he's inside, he wants to go outside again. So, yeah, just bear with me. Anyway, so your debt is the worst thing that kills your cash flow. That is where most of your money goes to. So what you want to do is you want to get rid of that debt first before you start investing. Because if you invest and you earn 6, 7, 8% interest, but you are paying 18, 19, 20, 22% on a credit card, a personal loan, these kind of things, you are still going backwards. So it's pointless to start investing while you are still paying these huge interest rates. First, get rid of that interest, and then you start building capital. So that is very important for you to make sure that you get rid of that bad debt first. Okay, why is it important to preserve what you have? Because imagine if something goes wrong and you cannot service your debt anymore, what's going to happen? They are going to repossess your car. They are coming to repossess your furniture, which means you are not preserving what you have. So how do you go about getting rid of bad debt? So through the coaching, we have a software program, and we have a system that the coach teaches you to slowly build momentum using the snowball strategy to get rid of your bad debt. But in principle, in simplistic forms, what you do is you create a positive cash flow, and that you do by taking control of your budget and your cash flow management. Create a positive cash flow. Use that cash flow to focus on one debt at a time. So you pay off one debt as quickly as possible. Then you take the total amount of positive cash flow created by paying off that debt plus the savings you had by taking better control of your budget, and you put that into the next debt. Once that is done, you take that whole amount, you put it into the next debt, and you continue with that process until you have paid off all your unsecured debt. That's how you get rid of it. And you will be amazed how quickly you can actually build momentum and get rid of all that unsecured debt. I've had people who, if they just continue paying their debt in the normal fashion, it would have taken them almost 70 months to get rid of their debt. Once we've done the snowball, we've created a positive cash flow by filling the holes in their bucket, they could get rid of that unsecured debt in about 14 months. So you go from 70 months down to 14 months. It is amazing what you can do once you have focus, you have a goal, and you are motivated to achieve that goal. So once you've gotten rid of unsecured debt, you want to build a reserve account. So what is a reserve account? A reserve account is an account which is made up of your emergency fund as well as your capital expenditure for the year. That is what we call your reserve account. But basically, you need a rainy day fund. That's your reserve account. You need to have money in cash available in an account for in case something goes wrong. For in case there's those once-off expenses like a car service or a car breaking down or a holiday or a birthday that you need to make provision for. Because these are the expenses that tend to get people into debt. Because what happens? Your budget is so tight on a month-to-month basis, you barely make it through, and then 1 month you suddenly have to put 4 new tires on the car. That costs 15,000 Rand. Now you don't have that 15,000 Rand in your budget. So what do? We take out a loan or we put it on our credit card. And then we think what we're going to do is we're going to pay that off. But then you start paying that off, so that means you have more expenses on a monthly basis, which means you have less cash flow. Then what happens is, as we start paying it off, something else happens. But now our budget is even tighter, which means we have even less money available to make provision for that debt or for that expense. And then what we need to do is we need to then go and take out more debt, which creates a bigger drain on our cash flow. And so we continue. And therefore, what happens over time is smaller and smaller annual expenses or capital expenses create debt. Initially, you might have a 5,000 Rand buffer in your budget. So if something happens to the amount of 5,000 Rand, you could carry it. But then you have a 7,000 Rand expense 1 month, and now you have to put 2,000 on your credit card. But that creates a smaller cash flow drain. So now you can't carry 5,000, you can only carry about 4.5. Now when something happens for 6,000, you have another 1,500 or 2,000 Rand on your credit, which means it's now drawn to 4,000. And so it continues. After a while, if there's a 2,000 Rand extra expense, you basically have to put it on the credit card or put it in a personal loan. And then we start consolidating these loans because our cash flow is running out. But as we consolidate the loans, we then we start creating more debt again. And within 6 months or 12 months, we're back into our old debt situation, but we have this consolidation loan as well. Guys, this is the reality of a lot of people, and I know some of you can relate to it. The only way you get out of it, the only way you preserve what you have, is making sure that you understand, you educate yourself, you create a proper budget, do proper cash flow management, start getting rid of that debt, and then create your reserve account. Remember, your rainy day fund, your reserve account, the focus there is not how much interest you can get on it. Therefore, you don't want a 30-day call account or any of these kind of accounts. The focus there is to have accessible cash available. That is the focus. Yes, you want to get some interest. You don't want to put it in a zero interest account, but that's not the main goal. The goal is to build a cash reserve so that you become your own bank. Now, a lot of people say, but how much of that, how much is enough? And that is where the coaching comes in. That is where we sit and we actually help you determine your minimum reserve level so you know exactly how much money you need in that account to make provision for emergencies, and secondly, to make provision for your capital expenses. And then the last part of your protection of wealth is to create a proper risk management plan. So this is where a lot of people think, oh, but it's life cover. But it's much more than that. A risk management plan includes everything that can happen to you that can influence your life or your dependents' lives. A death, a disability, a severe illness, a medical expense, a short-term insurance event, they steal your car, they break into your house. Any of those things can have a catastrophic influence on your financial plan if you don't have it in place. But here's the important part when it comes to creating your risk management plan. Stop focusing on beating what you've got and start focusing on creating something that does what you need. It's about what you need first, not what you've got. So when we create a risk management plan, when we work with our clients, create a risk management plan with one of our risk specialists, they will sit with you and they will first look at what you need. Only once they've determined that do they start creating a plan that does that. No more, no less. Because when you look at your risk expense, it is what I call what-if money. It's money you pay a third party for in case something happens to you. It doesn't create an asset. It doesn't come back to you unless one of the events that you are insuring happens. I don't care what these marketing companies and insurance companies try and sell people on. They're going to pay you your money back after so many years and blah, blah, blah. It's all about, it's bullshit baffles brains. It's basically just your own money that they are giving back to you. So guys, you want to create a risk management plan that does exactly what you need for the lowest possible premium. So it's not just about getting the lowest premium, it is getting the lowest premium for what you need. And to do that, you first have to determine exactly what you need. So you need to sit with a risk specialist and actually create a plan and see exactly what you need. Ask questions in a different way so that you have exactly what your family needs if something happens to you. Only once you've done all of that, you are then ready to start creating wealth. And that is where the cow side comes in, creation of wealth. And that is anything you can do to expand what you have, to build more assets. But here's the thing, everybody wants to invest. Everybody wants to run into Bitcoin and they want to create property investments and the next best thing. But nobody wants to do the groundwork to be ready to invest. You first have to do the groundwork. Get your protection of wealth sorted out and then move to creation of wealth. Otherwise, you're going to fall back and forth the whole time. You can't focus fully on creating wealth because you still have issues protecting your wealth. So get that right and the creation of wealth will go much faster. So when we come back after our music break, we're going to talk more about creation of wealth and how that will help you to solve your retirement worries. On Berg Studio, those of you who are listening to me on Berg Studio, we're going to listen to some absolutely from 9 Days, the story of a girl. Guys, those of you on our social media, let's continue with that video on why we created the coaching program. It hasn't, because it's not an income problem. It's a financial management and expense problem first. So if Eskom wants to fix itself, the first thing they have to do is forget about earning more money and first fix the financial management and the expenses. Cut the expenses, manage it better, get rid of corruption, get that right, and then add more money. And I promise you, if that is the case, the public will be more open to paying more for electricity because they know that the management is right first. So that is what we then decided we need to look at. We can't just focus on the income. We have to focus on financial management and teaching people what to do with the income. So from there, I developed a 4-step process, which then became the 5 steps to retire rich and happy. And the 5 steps are as follows. The first step is invest in yourself. It's about increasing financial education, taking control of your cash flow, making sure you don't have unsecured debt so that you have financial stability. The second step is minimize your risk. We have to build a proper foundation so that we make sure that the cornerstone for your financial situation or your financial freedom is laid properly by making sure that it doesn't matter what happens to you, your life and your dependents' lives can continue in the same manner as they were used to. The third step is then become an entrepreneur. Now you start creating multiple sources of income. So now we only address the income side of it. The first 2 is all about the expense and the financial management and the financial security side. Now we are only looking at creating more revenue. So that is become an entrepreneur. The 4th step is then invest in income generating assets. So we take the profit that you earn from your entrepreneurial ventures, we start putting it into income generating assets to create more income. And then we create what I call compound income instead of compound interest, where income creates more income, and that is what we want to get to. And then step number 5 is about retiring happy, and that's called pay it forward. So we developed the 5-step program and we started teaching people these 5 steps. We started doing seminars, forums, training sessions with people to show them the 5 steps. But after a couple of years of doing that, we realized that as much as everybody understands it and it makes sense because it's so simple, what happened is the people walk away from a seminar and they go, wow, this is the first time I've ever understood how these things work. I have a blueprint. I understand what I need to do. And they get home and they start working. Hi everyone, I am back again, and that was Story of a Girl, or absolutely I just know it as Story of a Girl. And for those of you watching on our YouTube channel and our other social media, you were watching some of our discussion around why we created our coaching program. So let's continue talking about creation of wealth. And if we look at the creation of wealth side, the first thing is, like I said before the break, it's anything you can do to expand what you have, to build on your assets, to create more assets. The one thing you need to understand when it comes to creating wealth is saving alone is not the answer. You will never save yourself into wealth or save yourself into retirement. The fact is, like I said in the beginning, 96% of people retiring in this country can't maintain their standard of living within 5 years after retiring. That is the reality, and we can't keep doing the same thing. So savings alone is not the answer, because you just cannot save enough money in your lifetime to retire comfortably. What they teach us is that if you start working, and from the day that you start working, you put away 15% of your gross income for 40 years, you will likely, hopefully, be able to retire with about 75% of your income. So even if everything happens perfectly, you get the returns they project, you never take your retirement money, you are never without a job, you never go through a financial struggle in your life. You just have this pure straight line from when you start working to when you retire, putting away 15% of your money. The best you can hope for is to retire with 75% of your income that you had before retirement, after retirement. Now guys, firstly, how many people have that straight line? That's not how life works. Life doesn't work in a straight line. I think less than 1% of people start at a company and stick with that company, no financial issues, no worries, for 40 years. We move companies, we go through financial difficulty, we get divorced, we get married, we have children, we buy houses, we do, life happens. So if you just focus on savings, the best you can ever hope for is 75%, but 99% chance you won't even get close to 75%. And that's the best they can offer from savings. So savings alone is not the answer. Let's quickly talk about how much is enough. How much should you save? If you wanted to do the savings thing, how much should you be saving? Now, that's where the rule of 300 and the rule of tens comes in. So the rule of 300 is to calculate how much capital you need to generate a certain amount of income. So let's say, for example, you earn 20,000 Rand a month, and that is what you want to retire with, 20,000 Rand a month in today's money terms. So if you want to generate 20,000 Rand a month, growing with inflation sustainably into the future, you would need 300 times that 20,000 Rand in capital to invest to generate it. So 300 times 20,000 gives us an amount of 6 million Rand. So if you wanted to retire with 20,000 Rand a month, in today's money terms, you now have to have 6 million Rand in an investment which you can invest for retirement. Okay, so if that's not bad enough, that is only for today. Remember, we still work with inflation. So if you work on a 6%, give or take a 6% inflation, you now have to look at the rule of tens. So what does the rule of tens say? The rule of tens say that for every 10 years into the future, you will need double the amount of money that you need today. So let's say you are now 35 years old and you want to retire at 65 with 20,000 Rand per month. How much income would you need by the time you are 65 to have the same amount of buying power as your 20,000 today? Well, 10 years from now, you would need 40,000. 20 years from now, you would need 80,000. So it's not 20 plus 20, it's 20 times 2 times 2. So you would need 80,000, and in 30 years from now, you would need 160,000 Rand per month to have the same buying power as 20,000 Rand today. Now, I know a lot of you will look at that and say that it's impossible. That is not, it can't be. How can I earn 160,000 Rand a month to have the same buying power as 20,000? And all I want to tell you is ask your parents what they earned, what they needed to earn to survive 30 years ago, and you will see how accurate this actually is. So if we look at that, you need 160,000 Rand per month, but now you have to multiply that 160,000 Rand per month times 300 to give you how much capital you would need to generate that income. So it's 160,000 Rand times 300, which means you would need 48 million Rand saved in capital in 30 years. So guys, 48 million Rand saved in 30 years to just give you 20,000 Rand a month in today's money terms. Now you start to realize why people cannot save enough money. So what we teach is that you need to change your focus. If you want to get to retirement, if you want to create wealth, if you want to expand what you have, you need to change your focus from building capital, chasing that 48 million that you would need because you're not going to get there, to replacing income. Replace the income that you are earning instead of focusing on building the capital. If you take everything that we do as a company and what we advocate, you can look at it at this picture. This is what we are focused on at iRetire. You have active income. You go to work, you get paid. You don't go to work, you don't get paid. That is your active income. What you want to focus on is building income streams, passive income streams, to reach your breakout point. Because the moment you have replaced your active income with passive income, you are free. Because now you don't need your active income anymore. You can decide whether you want to still earn that income, whether you still want to do the job that you're doing. Also, when we start changing our focus from building capital to replacing income, what that means is the age factor gets removed. Because no longer is the focus on getting there at 65. The focus is whenever you get to that breakout point, whether that is 40, 50, 55, 60, it doesn't matter. Your focus is to getting to that breakout point. And the only way you do that is by focusing on building income generating assets. Assets that could generate an income for you. So what are those assets that could generate an income for you? Now, before we get there, I want you to look at your situation and ask yourself, but how much of my income have I replaced so far? So if you have a retirement annuity and you have a pension fund at work, go and do a calculation. Go and look at what would you need if you had to retire tomorrow, and write that down. Let's say again it's 20,000 Rand. Then instead of looking at what the estimated maturity value would be on your capital, take the amount that you've already saved in your RA, take the amount that you've already saved in your pension fund, divide it by 300 and see how much of your capital have you replaced so far. And then compare it to where you need to be, because that will give you a much better indication of where you are. And always keep track of that. How much of my income have I replaced up to this point? Now, to replace income, we need to make use of 3 assets, not just one asset. We've been taught that capital assets, savings, is the most important way to generate or to get to retirement. You need to save enough money. But that's just one of the 3 types of assets. You need to create business assets, you need to create capital assets, and you need to create fixed assets. So what is a business asset? A business asset is any asset that generates an income as a result of what someone does in that asset. Now, you are a business asset as well. That's why you start with business assets. Currently, I always ask people, how many of you work for yourself? And then people say, no, I'm employed. Well, you still work for yourself because you are selling your time, your money, your expertise to your company for a specific amount of money. So you have your own business selling a product, but you only have one product, and that product is you. So you need to improve or increase your value as a product, but you need to create other business assets as well by creating leverage, by creating business assets that generate income on the efforts of other people. And that's part of what we teach in the coaching. We teach you how to create what we call transformational business assets instead of transactional business assets. But it starts with a business asset, whether that is you generating an income, whether you have a business that starts generating a part-time income, or you have a business that you don't have to be directly involved that is generating income for you, or you have created a leveraged income like royalties or anything like that. You need to generate income from somewhere and positive cash flow. That positive cash flow then gets put into capital assets. So capital assets is money that you have in an investment, you have in the bank, you have in a unit trust, you have in an ETF. Any of those kind of things are capital assets. And then you take those capital assets and you invest them again into any kind of fixed asset or any other business asset. You can take that capital asset, put it into a business asset again, generate more income from that business asset, or put it in a fixed asset. What is a fixed asset? A fixed asset is an asset that generates an income as a result of the asset, not what you do in the asset. Property is the most well-known one, although it's not the only one, but property is a very good example. If you own a flat, you own a townhouse, you don't have to go and work at that townhouse from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon to generate the income. The asset generates the income, the rental income, as a result of the asset. But you have to make use of all three of those assets. You can't just use the one. You have to use all three, and we teach you how to do that. And what we call those assets are income generating assets. A business asset is an income generating asset. A capital asset is an income generating asset, and a fixed asset is an income generating asset. Now, when you look at your capital assets first, that is your least effective income generating asset you can find. It is the lowest risk, but the least effective. Business assets is the highest risk, but with the highest potential return. And then fixed assets sit in the middle. It's got a higher risk than capital assets, but it also gives a higher return than capital assets. But you have to use all of this to create compound income instead of compound interest. So compound income is when you build your generational wealth spiral. So instead of earning interest on interest on interest, what you do with compound income is you earn income which you create more assets with, which creates more income, which you create more assets with. So you create what I call a generational wealth spiral. So how does that work? It starts with an income. Whether that income comes from your business asset, whether it comes from any of your capital assets, or whether it comes from a fixed asset. That income is what we call freedom income. That income goes into a capital asset. We call it your free bucks account, but that is a capital asset. So the money moves into that capital asset, into your free bucks account, and the capital asset is then invested into an income generating asset. The income generating asset creates more income, which creates another capital asset, which creates another income generating asset, which creates more income. And so you start building that spiral. And once the income from all of your income generating assets are equal or more than your lifestyle income, your active income, you are free. And that is how you create wealth. So remember to use protection of wealth, creation of wealth to create a sustainable retirement. You're not going to do it through capital alone. We need to start thinking differently about creating wealth. Guys, thank you for joining me. I'm going to finish the show on the social media platforms with the final minute or so of the video on why we created the coaching program. Enjoy the rest of the day and the weekend, and I look forward to chatting to all of you again next week. Those of you on Berg Studio, and something comes up, something doesn't fit in neatly into this structure, they have to think outside the box, or they get to an obstacle, something goes wrong, and then what happens? Then they go off the tracks, and there's this huge knowing doing gap. I call it the KD gap, the knowing doing gap. They know what needs to be done because we've taught them the strategy, we've taught them or given them the blueprint, the steps. But now to implement those steps is where the struggle comes in, and that is where a lot of people fell by the wayside. Battling to take it from theoretical knowledge to practical implementation. And because of that, about 3 years ago, I decided and said, listen, let us create a coaching model whereby we not only teach people the 5 steps, but we also guide them in the implementation of the 5 steps.
Financially raw, real, authentic wisdom with Lourens from Retire Rich and Happy.